You're now listening to Keep Alive on the Disruptors Podcast Network. Welcome, everybody, to Keep Alive. Hi, I'm your host, William Lee, and this is part 2 of exploring the challenges faced by the homeless in the state of Washington. The last show, we really looked at some of the major issues: housing, the financial situation on resources, and we took a look at the facts and the figures of how many people are actually living on the street. It's really, to me, shameless to have these individuals with families that are forced out to live under tarps and in unhuman situations simply because of the economic stage that's set for major cities throughout this country. You know, the cost of living, to give you an idea, in Seattle alone is 67.8% higher than the national U.S. average. Now think about that for just a moment. That's the cost of living just in Seattle. Now, I don't have any figures on any other areas like Tacoma or Thurston County. But when you have a figure that high, that's higher than the U.S. average, what does that tell you? That tells you right now that the cost of living here in Seattle is absolutely to the point whereas you have to make $150,000 a year to be able to survive, to have a roof over your head, to educate your children, to have clothing and food and all the necessities that go along with being a resident in Seattle, Washington. Wow. No wonder a lot of business people are moving out of town. Because to make that kind of money, you have to have an environment that conduces the opportunity for economical growth. And homeless people in the front of your business, or maybe the homeless across the street in their encampments outside your office window, are a deterrent to the safety of your employees getting back and forth to work, your customers, your clients, and actually maybe it's a big, shall we say, negative effect on the growth of business. Well, of course it is. Now, we got to go back further and dig some more and find out, how did all these people end up in the street to begin with? We talked about last time the factor there was a lack of affordable housing in many of the big areas such as Tacoma and Seattle. We also touched a little tiny bit on the lack of health care, which we'll get into in another interesting podcast coming up when we dive deeply into the system of how healthcare today is working for the benefit of everybody, who we, through the politicians, were promised in 1980 that everyone should have the right to good quality health care. And finally, the lack of public assistance programs that are not available or are underfunded. Resources for these people that are living on the street are terribly important and is a way of life. But if you don't have the money, due to the fact of high rate of job losses, why are there so many job losses in Seattle? Because businesses are forced to move out. Crime is up, homelessness continues to grow, and the safety of the individual that comes to the city to shop, people are just fearful of what could happen to them while they're in the areas where the homeless are encamped, which seems to be in major areas of commerce and business in Seattle. So let's take a look at what the homeless situation and causes to be worried about. Well, first of all, majority of the people that are on the street, I would say probably over 50%, are addicted, and drug addiction by the use of chemicals that are obtainable from junkies, gangs, and other organizations that thrive on capitalism with selling these types of drugs to those that, well, maybe have a little money or know how to get their hands on some money to buy their high, to stay completely in a world that is away from the actual reality of living on the street. Now, when you combine that with a lack of affordable health care, and you take a look at the actual seriousness of mental illness which is occurring, you stop and think for a moment, well, what can we do? I'm opposed over the situation of what I see when I go to these towns and see the homeless population scattered throughout the city. Here's how my guest on our podcast, Reverend Kelly Crow, described what I should see and how I should act.
The one thing you just got to get over is that it's happening. Mm-hmm. And quit trying to push it off to city to city or state to state. Amen. It's there. It's we just need to go and give them a sandwich and go love on them. And we just all need to work together. We all live on this earth, and we need to one time or the other we all need some help.
Right.
I mean, we can complain about it and point the fingers at this and that, but when it comes right down to it, we need to quit talking about it and quit going to have lunch and for 2 hours and talk about it and then meet up again a week later. Let's be proactive. Let's get out there and start doing something.
We first have to understand something right away, and that is homelessness is not a result of your choice or my choice, but I believe it's the complete failure of systems that drive a modern society. The dollar bill, the ka-ching and the cash register. Instead of choosing to ensure all the members of our society to have an equal opportunity of the American dream, of the benefits of being with a home, raising a family, ensuring the family, the safety of a family unit, well, what we've done is we've decided to throw that all away and allow just a few of us to have the ideology that the ka-ching of the cash register, that the dollar bill should be the system that rewards us. Yeah. Why should we worry about those who are not fast enough or think fast in different areas of business, who build empires, which we call corporations, where money comes flowing in to develop an idea that in turn ends up being worshipped and not giving the rights and the conditions to those all equally. Well, maybe you call it discrimination against those blue-collar workers or the poor people on the streets that work for minimum wage that can't make it, not in this area where our incomes have to match the outgo to survive of simple housing. Yeah, it doesn't work, does it? No, it doesn't. You know why? Because we have sold ourselves out. And when we sell ourselves out, we don't care about others. We worry about ourselves. Isn't that interesting? And then we don't ensure when we make a good living, when we have a good family dwelling, when we close our hearts and our minds to others, and we just let them wander. Well, these are all, of course, related to situations like no affordable housing, including evictions, of course, a multitude of people crowded in what I call unaffordable housing, or even housing that isn't really safe to be in. By offering all citizens equal access to the means of the above-mentioned conditions, homeless people could be eradicated. You know, we could take this achievement and make it achievable. We could take the people off the streets. It's going to take baby steps to do this, of course. But we could, within our lifetime, do this. It would require us to become compassionate at the expense of reducing systems that are promoting greed. And I think that's so very, very important. Now, what other problems are there as far as what's going on? We've talked about the why. What's the problem? Well, the problem simply is this, such as domestic violence, murder, drug sales, and the list goes on. You see, once a person lives on the street, it's not just a lifestyle, it's a style to stay alive. To be able to survive on the street, you've got to look at these factors that the street people that are homeless are looking at. Winter, it's cold and freezing weather. Where are you going to go to stay warm? How are you going to keep your kids warm or your family together in one spot, protected from crime, where it's warm, where they get 3 meals a day, where they don't have to fight and steal to get enough money together to come up with maybe a peanut butter sandwich or two in the 8 hours or 12 hours that they're out on the streets trying to figure out how to survive. Let's also look at another important part that comes up with the survival on the streets. That's what's happening to many of the women that are on the streets. You see, the state of Washington is also known for sex trafficking. They're also known for rape. Can you imagine that? Criminal activity like a rape happening? Oh, I don't think so, Mr. Lee. Well, in the homeless situation, when you're living on the street, there is a ethics and a code of survival that they have to practice to survive. And women, unfortunately, are usually the ones that take the blunt and end up with the short end of the stick. In this next soundbite, you're going to hear a woman that talks just about what it's like living on the streets as a woman and the biggest problem that you really have besides shelter, finding health care, and being able to have a roof over your head.
So you're telling me that you've been sexually assaulted out here?
Many times, yes, many times. And I've even got a sexually transmitted disease, and then they still do it again, and it's like, I'm not really, and I have a mental illness, and I'm not really happy with it at all,
Well, that's just absolutely terrible.
Yes, yes it is. I'm really upset about it.
I'm so sorry that's happening to you.
Thank you.
Now, after hearing this soundbite, the first thing that comes to your mind, I'm sure, which came to my mind, well, why didn't she go to the police and get help? You see, it's very interesting, but there's a code on the street. Maybe we understand it and maybe we don't understand it. The code on the street is simply this. You become a snitch, your life is going to be shorter. Your friends are going to suffer. And, if possible, whatever we can do to remove you from the community will happen. Where do you go from there? Do you continue to look over your shoulder to make sure that you're not being followed, that somewhere at some time you're not going to be beaten or hurt or robbed or whatever inhuman sacrifice you'll have to make because you snitched on the street? In the next soundbite, you're going to hear a young lady who is not that old. It's been living on the street for a few years. And what she has gone through as far as being raped and robbed. Now, here she is as she's being interviewed on the streets in Portland, Oregon.
What happened was I was saying no to him and stuff, and apparently he's come to my tent like 3 or 4 times and coming out of it. And a friend of mine told me that, and told him to, stay out of my tent because he knows he's not supposed to be there and stuff. So, I just didn't go back to my tent because I said, screw that, it's not worth my life and, whatever and stuff. So, it's just, you know what I mean?
But he eventually found you?
No, what happened was I was asleep in someone else's tent that wasn't there. And, because I was really tired and stuff, staying up for days and just avoiding, whatever. And I woke up with him already having sex with me and stuff. So that's what happened.
So as she said, that's what happened. How many times do you suppose that story's told? How many women do you suppose are raped, sodomized, robbed, beaten, and left in the streets because, well, That's just the way it is. You kind of think about being on a safari in Africa, and as you're going on the tour bus through the jungle, you look across the beautiful plains, and there's a lion mating with another lion. And when the job is done, the lion steps away, and the male lion disappears into the wood, never to be seen again. And what do you think the children see when they're in the car with mom or dad going to the grocery store? Maybe they're going to grandma's house to dinner, and they have to go through a city or a country area where the homeless population is growing. What do you suppose goes through their minds as they sit there and look out and see shopping carts and garbage and just an absolute, a village of just garbage? What do you think they're thinking? I don't know what I would be thinking as a child, but I'll bet you these children today are getting to the point where, oh, yeah, well, that's just the way things are. And that is a shame. You see, the actual numbing effect of continuously looking at homeless people alongside roads, graffiti, garbage, and all this other wonderful destruction of God's gift to us, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? It's hard to really, really put it in your mind and analyze it. It's difficult to understand what's going on, I'm sure. It's also very difficult to understand why the legislation, which is constantly asking for, well, we need more taxes to get more things done, never seems to be able to keep all these people from falling through the crack of bureaucracy and ending up in I would believe, a world of unsafe, actual destiny of violence. Can you really put it together any other way? Can you imagine the kids that are going to be coming out of there in the next 10, 15 years from now and without an education because they were hid out because mommy had to keep them out of sight because she didn't want to lose her children and then be dumped on the street? Can you imagine what it's going to be like when they make friends and later down the road they say, well, what did your mom do when you were a kid? Well, Mom, we lived well, where did you live? We're excited to know where you came from. Well, I came from the corner of 49th and whatever, right there on the sidewalk. That's where I lived. Mommy and Dad and everybody. Yeah, well, Dad left. He found things weren't too good, and he decided to go out and find us a better way of life. But we still never understood why he never came back. How about, well, all the other problems that you had? Dad didn't come back, but what about Mom? Well, Mom was kind of on drugs, to ease the pain of Dad leaving and us having to beg for the next meal, not knowing where it's going to be or who is going to make it or how we're going to survive in the cold weather in the winters. This is all real, and it's happening. And if we don't start a conversation, and if we don't start moving forward to give a helping hand up, not out, like the Democrats would like us to do, a helping hand up, like the Republicans think they would like us to do, but never seem to come up with the money. That helping hand has to come from you and I. We have to get rid of all the bureaucracy. We have to just go out, and even if it's just to help them maybe find somewhere to go to eat, or maybe give them a ride to a clinic, or maybe just talk to them and let them know that there's people out here that care about them. Maybe that would help us with the homeless situation. Well, I hope you've had an opportunity to think about this being the second part of our homeless series. If you have any questions or any ideas about how maybe you could help us get a conversation going to help the homeless, I want you to send me a note. It's at Keeba, Keeba agency @gmail.com. I'd also like to thank everybody that's on Facebook that has sent me wonderful invitations and wanted to talk. It's been fantastic because now I feel like after 7 years of putting together our network and extending out a hand to start conversations, that people are really beginning to understand. They're looking to see what else is going on that should be a conversation to take to prevent the action of the, what I call, destroying of America. Well, until next time, remember our old saying that I kind of like to finish every show with, even on our live shows coming up in December. I'd like to simply remind you that if you put a little love in your heart, you know, that love that gives a helping hand up to someone, even if you just give them a moment of your time to show them that they care, that they are important to this world, and keep a positive thought in how we can change the lifestyle of the homeless simply by taking a positive attitude and moving forward with conversation. Maybe then you'll always keep us smiling.